Our very special guest today is a podcast and automation coach who helps busy solopreneurs take back their time. Some even say he perfectly blend content creation and technology like it's the best cup of coffee you have ever had. His strategies come from his many years of experience, over 10 years creating podcasts, more than 15 years teaching, and over 20 years as a web developer. He also produces 3 podcasts, makes 30 to 50,000 every year on sponsorships alone, and gets 60,000 downloads every month from his podcast while raising 3 small children. And that's because his podcast systems save him 12 hours every week. So, guys, help me in welcoming the podcast systems coach, Joe Casabona. Welcome to the show, Joe.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
My first question for you would be, what got you into podcasting?
When I left my full-time job, I went to become a solopreneur, and I realized I missed having conversations with people. Like conversations with my coworkers or with other people in the space were very important to me, and I felt like I was going to lose that by working remotely by myself. So I decided to start a podcast to talk to other people in my space, which actually at the time was WordPress development, about how they built their products. And I loved it. I should say I had a podcast before that, but it was very bad. It was basically just like me and a bunch of friends talking about things we didn't know about. So the main show that is still the show going today started as a way for me to learn from my friends and colleagues while also putting out interesting content and asking questions that I didn't feel in 2016 or 2017 at least were getting asked very often. Like tell me about your failures and what was something that you really struggled with when you were launching this product or service or business.
Yeah. So how did you actually discover podcasting? Because you are talking about 2016, right? I assume podcasting wasn't even a thing back then, right? Because podcasting has only gone viral or popular over the past couple of years. So back in 2016 when you first started a podcast, how was it like to have a podcast?
Yeah, it was super interesting. So I'll say that like I started my first show, the one with my friend. It
Yep.
was basically just like talking over Skype in 2012. Even though most of us lived in the same place. I didn't have like the advanced recording equipment I had today, so we just all kind of recorded on our built-in microphones using Skype. Um, I had discovered podcasting or podcasts a couple of years before that because I was out at like it was basically like a camping weekend with a bunch of my guy friends, and we were talking about all sorts of different topics. Now, I majored in computer science. I have my master's in software engineering. I knew a lot about computers and technology, but my friends seemed to know a lot about a lot of things. And so I was like, how do you like where do you guys learn? Right? Like, do you just like read blogs or you read a lot of books? And a bunch of them mentioned podcasts. So I started looking into podcasts and what shows covered topics I was not familiar with. Stuff You Should Know was one of the first ones I really subscribed to and listened to.
Right.
And yeah, I learned that it was a great way for me to learn because I would walk to work or I'd spend time in the car driving home from where I lived to my parents' house or to my girlfriend's house. And it was a great way for me to consume content and learn. I loved it. And so I wanted to carry on that medium and contribute in a way that I felt was impactful.
Yeah, that's beautiful, right? So, you have been podcasting for almost a decade, right? What kept you going? Because we all know that most podcaster, the average podcaster quits after 3 to 7 episodes, right? Roughly. What kept you going for so long, so many years?
Yeah, so that first show, so first of all, I'm an extrovert. So I love talking to people. I love teaching, right? I actually taught at the University of Scranton for uh 5 or 6 years before moving away from Scranton, and I continue to teach online. And so podcasting seemed like a really low stakes, I won't say low effort, it's obviously not low effort, but like low stakes way for me to teach things that I knew. And I'm also an experimenter. Like if there's a problem, I have to solve it. Much to the chagrin of my wife sometimes. Like she'll be like, I just want to talk. And I'm like, I need to solve this problem though. And so with that first show, when I realized our format wasn't working, I tried to rework it a couple of different ways before eventually abandoning it because I knew that I wasn't contributing educationally in a way that I hoped, right? So when I launched my next show a couple of years later, I had already made a ton of mistakes and I had been listening to podcasts for a while and I wanted to do something that was different, and so I took everything I had learned from those experiences, put them into my next show, which is now called Streamline Solopreneur. It used to be called How I Built It. It launched a few months before NPR's How I Built This, which I stubbornly kept the name for too long, but that's okay. Um, anyway, so when I launched that show, because I had applied what I had learned from like past failures or other experiments, that show took off pretty quickly. And so, they say like, you know, overnight success takes 10
Mm,
years or whatever. Um, my show felt like an immediate success to people who were looking from the outside. But what they didn't see was the 5 or so years of me listening and consuming podcasts and then trying my own failed podcast, which most people don't know about, and applying what I've learned to that. I didn't just try to do the same thing. I experimented, I tried, and I iterated.
What were some of your biggest failures that or mistakes perhaps that you could share with us so that we can, as podcaster or aspiring podcaster, can avoid when it comes to podcasting? If you don't mind sharing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think the biggest mistake that I made was not doing any research at all in that first show. That first show was called TIL Podcast for Today I Learned. And it was just like me and a few friends talking about like whatever headline we came across. Like we barely even knew the topic we were going to discuss when we got on the call. And
Mm,
so we couldn't adequately talk about that, right? Like, except for our perceptions.
yeah,
And that's one lesson I didn't really learn that I carried into How I Built It, now Streamline Solopreneur. I was like, I'm going to ask the same 5 questions. I'm not going to do research because I said I want to be surprised
yeah.
like my guests, right? And looking back, I know that that was a big misstep because it's almost like saying, I'm going to get in a car and I'm going to drive somewhere, but I'm not going to figure out how to get to where I'm going.
Yeah.
So now you're just driving around looking for something, and that's like a waste of time and gas and wear and tear on your car. And so if you are doing an interview, I would say that you don't have to do like a deeply researched profile, but do enough research to ask the right questions to get the answers you want to get for your listeners.
Yeah.
I think that's super. Like we did that on our little pre-call. You
Yeah.
had obviously done research about me because you said things that like I have on a single page on my website. Um
Yeah.
and I think that's super important. So
Yes.
that's the biggest mistake I made. I think the other big mistake I made was not doing more solo episodes soon enough. And so when I launched How I Built It, I thought, oh, okay, well, I'll just use this as a way to sell my online courses, where I
Yeah.
would like interview the developer of the software that I was making a course for. And that didn't pan out because I immediately got sponsors and then didn't feel like I could promote my own stuff, which
Mm,
is maybe like a third mistake. Like you can have sponsors and promote your own stuff, and you should.
mm,
As a result, I didn't spend a lot of time on my podcast establishing my own authority,
yeah.
which you can do most effectively through solo shows. So now I try to do at least one a month. I would love to do like every other one as a solo show. I want
Mm,
to ease into that because it's been an interview. It's been mostly interviews for 8+ years or whatever, or 8 years this
yeah.
month as we record this. So I think that if you're starting out or you're at the beginning, mix in a solo show from time to time because it puts the spotlight on you. It makes you the expert. And frankly, they're easier than interviews, right? You don't have to do the uh hey, when can we meet dance, and then you don't have to work out the technology, right? Like I had an interview with a friend who's a seasoned podcaster, and it took us 45 minutes to figure out what
Wow.
was going on with our recording because a device that she was using was failing, just like it was like bad timing, right? But like you don't have to worry about that with a solo show, right? You can turn on the camera and or QuickTime on if you have a Mac and record, and do some light editing and descript and release it. So that's like a win-win. So I think those are the two big mistakes: is do more research.
Mhm.
Doesn't have to be a ton. You're not creating a doctoral dissertation, just
Mhm.
enough to guide the conversation. Or if it's a solo show, make the points you want to make, and then do more solo shows. I think that's really important, especially for business owners who want to start a show to grow their business.
Yeah, because it's all about you get to share your expertise, insights, your story, your add value to your listeners, right? It's all about authority building as we talk about briefly. So why do you think? Okay, let's talk about people who are thinking about starting a podcast. I know a lot of people in my audience, community, they're hesitating, right? So tell them why, or do you believe? Okay, first, do you believe that everyone should have a podcast, or everyone can be a podcaster, and why is that?
Yes. I have been around the internet a very long time. I launched my personal blog in like 2000. I made my first website when I was 14, again, like around 2000. And I am seeing the same conversation about podcasting
Yeah,
that I saw with blogs, where people would say, why should I start a blog when there's already a blog that exists about X or
yeah.
whatever, right? I guess I shouldn't say X anymore because that's like a platform, about some topic, right? Um, but the thing is, and this is even more important in the age of AI,
Mm,
that blog or that podcast or that generated article doesn't have your perspective and your worldview and your experience like that. And that's something that AI will never replace. I'm going to try really hard not to get on an AI soapbox right now, because I want to answer your question, which is, why should everybody have a podcast? Because you have unique life experiences, you have a perspective that is going to jive with your with a set of potential clients,
mm,
right? I'm a podcast coach and I know I'm not for everybody. I have strong opinions about the way people should do things, but the people who hire me love me because of those strong opinions. And
yeah,
without a podcast, people wouldn't know those strong opinions. I think it's really important for you, if you want to be not just a thought leader, but as someone who can show your receipts, right? As someone who's not just making empty claims that if you want to, how to become how to launch $1 million business in a weekend, right? Like, okay, the guy who wrote that book didn't do that. And so that feels like an empty promise. There's
mm,
good advice in there, but it feels like an empty promise. But if you want to show your receipts, you can talk about what you're doing, what you've done, how you're thinking about your space. I think most easily on a podcast.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And it has your own, like you said, it's about, to me, it's all about authenticity. It's all about you showing up like us, right? We're just showing up as human, as who we are, and just have a conversation, right? Easily. And that's why I love podcasting so much. So you have 3 podcasts, right? So often people tell me, Joanne, I don't have time. Like, I don't have time to start a podcast, right? I have so many things to do, like, on my plate. And you and me, we have 3 podcasts. So it proves that, yes, podcasting actually doesn't take you a lot of time if you have a system in place like you help people with, right? Automation or stuff like that. But tell us, why did you have 3 podcasts? Why do you need 3 podcasts?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, so my first show, the Streamline Solopreneur, which again I've been like using the names interchangeably. It's called Streamline Solopreneur now. It was called How I Built It. That's the thing that gives me the authority to be a podcast coach, because it was charting for a while. It was charting in the top 25 podcasts in technology on Apple Podcasts. It has made me 6 figures in sponsorships alone. I have experimented with the format. I've seen ups and downs and downloads, right? It's the show that I do the best, and it's also the show where I can experiment the most and bring those experiments back to my clients and my email subscribers. So that's, people say those who can't do teach.
Yeah.
Streamline Solopreneur is me doing it, right?
Mm,
Um, Podcast workflows, that is my solo show where I'm building authority in the podcasting space. That's me teaching. I'm basically doing stuff with Streamline Solopreneur, and I'm talking about it on podcast workflows, and I'm giving a lot of free advice
Right.
over on podcast workflows. The third show is a little bit different. That's called Start Local. My friend Liam and I launched it in April 2020 because we wanted to put out a informative business resource for people in Chester County, PA, which is where we both live. And I am a transplant to this area, right? I grew up in New York. And then when I went to the University of Scranton, I like slowly moved downstate, down Pennsylvania, and settled here in Chester County because this is where my wife's family is. But as a result, I didn't know a lot of people.
Mm.
And so Start Local, teaming up with my friend Liam and now our other co-host, Eric, they are both well connected in the area. And so I serve as a sometimes host, usually podcast producer and resident podcasting expert, but it gives me the opportunity to network with
Yeah.
people in my area. So it serves as a really excellent networking tool while also elevating nonprofit and business voices in our area. So it's two serves two different purposes there for me at least.
Yeah, it serves all the purpose. Like to me, a podcast serves all the purpose, right? It helps you build authority, helps you build a personal brand, grow your network, get clients, generate leads, everything, right? A podcast does everything for you. Pretty awesome. So you have three podcasts and you are a system coach, right? Automation coach for podcasters. So can you share what is your workflow? How do you, what are some of the system, if you can share with us, like what is your workflow when it comes to having your podcast, running your three shows?
Yeah, for sure. So I fear sometimes I get too much in the weeds on this and I scare people
Okay.
off. So I will just say right at the beginning, I've been podcasting for over a decade
Mm-hmm.
and I have built these systems over a very long time, right? Rome wasn't built in a day, neither was my podcast process. So here's where I think I'll say a couple of things I do, and these are some places where maybe you could start, right? Or the
Yeah.
the listeners can start. Number one is booking guests. If you're going to have guests, you absolutely, I feel lately like this is a non-negotiable.
Mm,
You should have a scheduling link, right? So Calendly is a popular one. I recently switched to cal.com, cal.com,
okay.
because it has all of the features of Calendly, but it's completely free. They make their money off of Teams and Enterprise.
Okay.
So, whenever a product is completely free, I'm always like, what's the catch? Like, are you gonna be gone in a year, right? Um,
Yeah.
but they have what seems like a really decent business model. It also, for me at least, works better than Calendly. Because I use make.com, formerly Integromat, for my automations, and
Mm,
cal.com works better with make.com than Calendly did. So I think like it's a really good free option if you're looking for scheduling. And then I mentioned automations. The second part of booking guests and why I think scheduling links are non-negotiable is because when someone books with you, you can automatically send them to a podcast planner or episode tracker or whatever you're using to stay organized. And the staying organized is so important
yeah.
because if you're not organized, you may come to a situation where it's Monday and you publish on Tuesday and you go, oh my God, I forgot I don't have an episode today, right?
Yeah.
Or I don't have an episode for tomorrow. Now you're freaking out. What do I do? Do I find something really quick? Do I release an old one? Do I do a quick solo show? And that's just not going to be good content, right? One of
Mm,
my favorite things to say to my kids is I first heard it on Modern Family, Phil Dunphy saying, "Slow is smooth, and smooth is fast. If you try to rush something, it will be bad. So
yeah.
you should go slow and take your time because slower is going to be smooth and smooth is going to ultimately be faster than trying to rush through it and trying to do it over and over again, right?
Mm,
So I that really resonates with me, and having a podcast planner where I'm looking at mine right now. I've had a few guests for my show cancel on me recently, so
okay.
I know that I have 2 episodes ready to go, which is fine because I also take a midsummer break.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I know that I I need to prep one episode and then probably record a couple of solo episodes so that I don't come back from vacation and realize, oh man, I don't have any episodes,
Yeah.
right? I can see that I don't have, like, I can see a month out that I don't have episodes. So I think if you're starting somewhere, scheduling link and podcast planner are super important. And I do have, I don't know if there's going to be like opportunity for me to mention it, but I do have a few templates I'm happy to share with your audience as
Oh,
well.
yeah, I was about to ask that though. I was about to ask, do you have a planner for us to, some tool for us to use? Yeah, for sure I'll drop your link in the show notes. So for people who wants to download, your guide or templates, feel free to do so. So let's talk about people who already have a podcast. Maybe they are still new, maybe 3 months, 6 months, or they're starting. What are some of your strategies to grow or market a show? Because a lot of people, this is like the part that most people are struggling with, like they are stagnant, right? Their listenership, their downloads are not growing. So do you have any strategies for that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I'll say like right at the outset that I don't consider myself a marketer. Um, I do know how to do things organically, right? So I think if you're looking for a good guest who is a podcast marketer, Jeremy Enns is great. He has that marketing brain. Where I'm very like again, I was a developer for 20 years, so I'm just like I built this good thing and you should see it because it's good, right? Um, that said, if you want to grow your podcast, there are a few ways to do it. I have a 9 point framework that I'll apply to like when I audit a podcast. I think the most important things are around packaging, like we mentioned earlier, right? So the most important thing, the core, the root of all of this is a good mission statement.
Right.
Because without that, without knowing who your audience is and what problem they have and how you help them solve that problem, the rest of this can't really happen.
Mm,
Um, so you answer those three questions, and then you look at your title. Is your title clear?
mm,
Do people know what they're going to get from your podcast just based on the title? If I called my podcast the Joe Casabona Show, two people on earth would care about it, my mom and my wife. And like, it's iffy on my wife. She sees me every single minute of every single day, basically. So probably just my mom would care about it. People don't know who Joe Casabona is, right? The reason I renamed the show from How I Built It to Streamline Solopreneur is because when I launched the show, How I Built It made perfect sense, right? I would literally ask my guests, so tell me, how did you build it? Right? I stopped asking that question in 2020 because I switched audiences and niches, and people would read the name, and I saw a dip in my downloads because people would see the name and they wouldn't get the
yeah.
packaging didn't match the content, right?
Yeah.
It's like putting Raisin Bran in a Lucky Charms box. Like my kids would be so disappointed with that, right?
Mm,
Though I guess my kids like Raisin Bran. So the name should reflect the podcast, or like the content of the podcast. You should also have a tagline for your podcast, right? So um, these are like some extra words in the title that you don't necessarily have to say during the naming of the show, but this is going to help people contextualize the show, right? So podcast workflows is not the title of the show is not just podcast workflows. It's podcast workflows dash tips for podcasters to grow their podcast without wasting time,
mm,
right? So they immediately see the value proposition before they ever click through to anything, right? Again, Streamline Solopreneur is tips to help busy solopreneurs free their time. I'm big on time, right? I have 3 small kids. I know time is a limited resource. So that's the first thing. The next thing is the description. I'll do the top three here because this will take forever.
yeah.
The next thing is the description. You want to have a strong description that doesn't say, in this podcast, host Joe Casabona talks about ways that you can save time in your business. We've wasted a full sentence on something they already know, right? They know it's a podcast. They don't care about the host, and the tagline has already told them that much, right?
Yep.
Instead, you want to hook people,
Mm,
right? I once worked with a copywriter who said you should never ask questions on your landing pages because it gives people the opportunity to say no. I fully disagree with that statement. I want people to say no to the questions I'm
Yeah.
asking because it filters them out, right? So I start off the description of the Streamline Solopreneur with, what if you could save 12 hours per week in your business?
Mm,
Being a solopreneur sometimes focuses too much on the solo part. If people are nodding in agreement with those two sentences, I've got them, right?
yeah.
They're at least going to check out the rest of the show and the episodes. And that's the next thing I'll mention here, right? So your description should read like a movie synopsis. Don't mention the name of the show until later. You
Mm,
shouldn't really need to say in this podcast at all, or at least say it like way later. Because if you look at a show, this is all because if you look at a podcast in Apple Podcasts on a mobile device or the desktop, you have like 3 or 4 lines.
yeah.
That's it to convince people to check out your show. And so we won't get into podcast artwork today. The next thing I'll mention that I think is really crucial is episode titles and descriptions.
Yes.
Don't start your episode title with episode number whatever, right? That's really, and I'm this is another mistake I made for years, right? All of my first episode, like my first 150 episodes really were like episode 1, Jason Coleman and paid memberships pro, right?
Uh-huh.
Episode 3, Brian Krogsgard and post status. Like those were the actual titles. Unless people know who Brian Krogsgard and post status are, like no one's going to care about that. Certainly no one's going to care that this is the 3rd episode of the show. Like that's like largely irrelevant data. You should hook your listeners, right? Now, I actually had my VA go back and retitle all the episodes. So like that first episode with Jason Coleman is now building the most flexible WordPress membership plugin with Jason Coleman.
Mm,
Journalism in the WordPress space with Brian Krogsgard, right? Today it's even better, right? I have like how to generate predictable income by joining affiliate programs, right? That's like a literal question people are asking, right? So when they Google that, hopefully my episode comes up because the promise is that the show is going to answer that question, which it does. It does a very good job of that. So you want to use terms that people are searching for, whether it's in a directory or in Google, because at the time of recording, there's no good algorithmic discovery for podcasts.
yeah.
And so you want to optimize for the organic. Though I think that's the best thing that you can do for your podcast is make sure your show is positioned correctly and your episodes are positioned correctly. Because if they're not, and you do decide to like put ad dollars behind your show or market it in some other way, it doesn't matter,
Yeah.
right? Like if people don't know what they're going to get, then you're wasting money. So you
Yeah.
want to get those things right first.
Yeah, so true. I love all everything, right? Because it's all about who you are speaking to, right? Who are trying to reach, like again, back to your, what is your mission statement? Like, why do you have a podcast? Who is it for, right? These are the really just like anything, right? If you want to start a business, if you want to start a coaching business, who is it for? What kind of problem that you're solving, right? It's the same with a podcast. So the last question that I have is, what is your secret to success in podcasting? You have a lot of sponsorships, you have downloads, like 60,000 downloads. What is your secret to success?
Yeah, I love this question. And I don't think anybody would describe me as humble, but I don't. This is a question I don't ponder too much because I think I really think I just go out there and I do the job.
Mm,
So in 2018, Seth Godin said that podcasting is the new blogging, because podcasting is the generous act of showing up. And I'm going to say my success really stems from the generosity part, right? I like I almost wore a t-shirt today from ConvertKit that said teach everything you know. And that's what I try to do on my podcasts. My number one goal is always to teach people something. I try not to withhold a lot of stuff. I try to just talk about what I'm thinking about and how I'm thinking about it. Um, and people really like that.
mm,
Well, it seems at least that people really like that, right? So there's genuine curiosity, and then there's this generosity to want to teach people as much as possible. And so even though I don't have the biggest audience, I have a loyal audience and sponsors like the vibe, I guess, that I'm putting out, right?
mm,
So start with your audience and serving your audience, I fully believe this. Start with your audience and serving your audience, and good things will come from that. If it's not sponsorship dollars, then it's clients, or it's potential speaking engagements, or
Yeah.
whatever it is your goal is. Right? There's a lot of good that comes from the generous act of showing up.
It's called the show up show. It's all about showing up consistently, right? Confidently. Because and it to me, podcast is a platform for me to be congruent with my message. It helps me improve my message, right? Help me become clearer with my message. Now, tell my people where they can find you online, and if they want to work with you, how do you? What is your offer? Like, how do you help podcaster, or do you help people who want to start a podcast?
Thanks for asking this. So I'm going to set up a page where you can get my free podcast planners in Notion, Airtable, or Google Sheets. That's going to be over at podcastworkflows.com/Joanne. You said Joanne?
Yeah.
Joyan. And so there will be the free resource. It'll be ways to connect with me. And it'll be a couple of other like blog, like I just wrote a huge piece called The 7 Deadly Sins of Podcasting, and like how you can stay consistent and keep doing your show. So lots of good resources over there. My two main offers are a podcast audit where I will go through, I gave you 3 of the things for growing your podcast and making sure it's positioned the right way. I go through all 9 of those and I'll do a custom video for you. So it's a very personalized review of your show. There's also a self-guided audit template if you're not ready to make the kind of personalized investment yet. I understand that. So I'll be sure to link that on the show too. I also do one-on-one coaching. So if you're interested, you can reach out via that page, and we could see if a one-off coaching session or an ongoing coaching session is right for you. And there we'll cover growing your show and really optimizing your show so you can spend your time creating good stories,
Yeah.
reaching out to sponsors, or spending time with your family, right? We're going to free up like a whole work week
Yeah.
in your month. So you can spend that time the way you'd like.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, podcasting doesn't have to take out all your time, right? Really, it's true, right? So yeah, I really want people to stop believing that podcasting is gonna take out all your time. No, it's to, in fact, it frees up your time, right? With a podcast, you don't have to create other content anymore. And imagine, right? Nowadays, people are creating content over TikTok, Instagram, LinkedIn. Like when you have a podcast, you just focus on creating a podcast and repurpose, right?
I fully agree with that, right? Like a podcast can be like the starting point for content everywhere, right? And if you think about that and you put a little, if you have the time to put a little more planning in, then you can plan your TikTok worthy videos, right? Where it's not just like you trying to edit and crop the right sentence
Uh,
or whatever. You can make the point strongly and release that separately.
yeah, I heard that is one of the strategies as well, right? You just
Yeah.
like think about what do you want to create for your TikTok and then make it into your podcast episode. Yeah, it's a cool
Yeah.
strategy. That.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, guys. I know you love this episode. I'm sure you learned a lot from today's episode. If you have any question, feel free to leave a comment below. If you're listening this to this on Spotify, we'll have a column for you to leave a question, and we'll get back to you. Remember to like and subscribe so you never miss another episode. And I'll put all the links in the show note below. So make sure you visit the show note and get the planner, and also connect with Joe. Thanks him for coming to our show today. And thanks for listening. And I will see you in the next episode. And let's make you the next podcasting rockstar. Bye.